We'll go ahead and get started. Let's call the Johnston City Council Work Session number 24-08 to order. Cindy, roll call, please.
Councilmember Cope. Councilmember Cope.
Here.
Evans.
Here.
Martin.
Here.
Ready.
Here.
Burkhart.
Here.
We have two items on the agenda this evening. The first is to receive a presentation from the Des Moines Area MPO Comprehensive Safety Plan.
Good evening. For the fiscal year 2023, the Des Moines Area MPO received a Safe Streets and Roads for All grant. As part of that, they're doing a comprehensive safety action plan for the entire Des Moines Metro. And they've hired a consulting team to do that. And Brian Wilhelm with HR Green is here tonight to just give you a presentation update on that project. So I'll turn it over to Brian.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me. Let's see, pull this up first. Okay. Like Dave mentioned, my name is Brian Wilhelm. I'm with HR Green, and we're a part of the consultant team that's working for the Des Moines MPO on this comprehensive safety action plan. And so we're pretty early on in the process, so we're really visiting with all of the member communities in the MPO, just to give you an idea of what this plan is, what you can expect coming down the road and stuff like that. So we're pretty early in the overall process right now. And I'll kind of point out a couple things as we go, but you'll probably notice there are definitely some similarities here between what's going on with this plan and what you all been doing with your citywide traffic study. So there's definitely some similar data being looked at and things like that. And so just as we go through this, please know that we know about that study and that we're taking all that into account too, so that it's not sort of two things happening without the other knowing. So let's see. So this is coming out of, and you may have heard, one of these new funding programs through the infrastructure law a couple of years ago was this SS4A, so Safe Streets and Roads for All. This funding program is something that's open to any MPO, any city. It's not necessarily through DOTs, so that's a little different than usual. But in this case, the Des Moines MPO applied for the region and was successful in receiving some money to do this plan that we're talking about. This is just a quick picture of what the MPO is, and I think you guys are all familiar with that. Really the biggest change here in the last few months is the entirety of Polk County coming into the MPO, and so that's part of what we're looking at with our data collection and things like that. And again, just some bullet points on what the MPO does with the regional planning. They really take care of a lot of the planning for the region, looking at the funding and stuff. And for this particular project, Zach Young, if you know him, he's the overall project manager for this effort. And like I mentioned, we're part of the consultant team. Tool Design is leading the team. Confluence, ourselves, and HDR are part of that team too, helping to support Tool. So the purpose, very similar to what, the reason why you looked at your citywide traffic study, is to reduce or eliminate fatal and serious injury crashes at the end of the day on the transportation network. And so this comprehensive safety action plan, that's the specific name of the plan that's coming out of all of these funding, or all of these projects through that funding program. So that funding program, just real quick, is sort of a two-part one. You can apply for funds to do these comprehensive safety action plans. And once you have that in place, then there's a second side of that funding that you can say, okay, we've done our comprehensive safety action plan. We've identified the prioritized projects out of that. Then you can apply for the actual implementation or construction of those projects too. So that would be coming down the road later. And again, it's focused on eliminating the fatal and serious injury crashes. And these are just some bullets at the bottom of sort of what's involved with this planning process. And you can see that the last bullet there, ultimately we go through, we look at the data, do the process, and then ultimately be able to apply for that side of the grant program. These, this funding program is kind of built on the safe street or on the safe systems approach. So you may have heard about this through some of the other plans going on in town. And so it's really just this idea of, trying to look at, trying to understand that, death and serious injury is unacceptable, but humans do make mistakes and that humans are vulnerable and responsibility is shared across all these different things. And so, safe roads, that's one that we're normally involved in, but it's all these other things too that sort of go along with it. So these comprehensive safety action plans, we'll get a little bit into some of these other ideas too, just for some ideas on some policies and guidelines that the community can take a look at, to try to see what's going on in things other than just, pure engineering work. And this is just a list of the key things that this funding program tells us has to be involved in each one of these, or in each one of these studies. And so you can see right now, we're really in the number 3 and 4, sort of working on that, taking all of the safety data, analyzing that, having meetings like this, just making sure that we get out and talk to all the community so you understand what's going on. And then at the end, I'll show you that we've got a project website too that you can go on to and provide comments and things like that. So the project goals, ultimately, one of the first things that has to go into one of these plans is that the region, in this case, since the MPO applied as a region, will come together and decide what's right for the Des Moines Metro as far as what the target is. Some communities or regions, say they want to eliminate totally serious injury and death. Some say that they want to more commit to a significant reduction. And then there's a target year discussion too. Excuse me. And I think the idea here is that as we get a little bit further into looking at the data and looking at what we've got to deal with, that'll help sort of drive this discussion as far as what a reasonable target and target year could be. This is just some data that Tool Design put together for us, just to give you an idea of some national data, if you're curious about some of that. So, we always hear the numbers, the 30 or 40,000 people that die every year on the transportation systems across the country. So these are nationwide numbers here. And then this just kind of gives you an idea, just showing sort of over time, since 2010 or so, pedestrian bicycle fatalities, has really been on an upward swing that, that's concerning. Again, this is, nationwide. So as we've started to dig into some of the crash data, we do have a few numbers that we've started to put together. And here you can see that we've had over 1,800 fatal and serious injury crashes in the last 10 years, and over 150 people in the metro were involved in these fatal and serious injury crashes just in 2020. Again, here's some more numbers. I won't read through them all. You've got it in your packet, but just kind of gives you a sense of, we usually look at these things in kind of 5-year study period. So that's why you see the 2018 to 2022. But it just kind of gives you an idea of, especially on the right there, kind of, what sort of user was involved in these crashes that led to fatalities or serious injuries. And then as our team started to go through and look at the data and see what's coming out of it, we've just got some bullet points here just to let you know what we're sort of seeing there. Weekends and dark conditions are definitely a trend where a lot of these things are happening. Single vehicle crashes, almost half of these types of crashes. And as you can probably imagine, people on motorcycles or pedestrians, just because they're unprotected, if you will, do have that higher likelihood of leading to one of these types of crashes we're talking about. And some more bullets here. The VRU, that's the vulnerable road user. Again, pedestrians, bicyclists, unprotected users. And a lot of them are happening at intersections, 65% entering or crossing roadways. And then as you're probably aware through the other studies too, speeding continues to be a big issue, no matter what we're talking about when it comes to crashes. So some next steps of what we're up to right now. And again, there's a lot of great public input that Johnston's already done through that citywide study. So we'll most definitely be taking a look at that too. But there's an opportunity to provide, extra input or if there's anything else that that you would like to have documented, we would love to have that too. And I'll show you. And I think on the handout that's in your packet is where that website shows up. Some things that we're going to be doing next is looking at an equity analysis and just kind of using what the MPO uses for some of their disadvantaged areas and kind of overlaying that with this high injury network, which is the next thing on the list. And that's really where taking all the crash data across the whole metro and then kind of trying to find where the worst of the worst is, if you will. So the network of the streets where the crashes are really being concentrated. And I'm sure it'll be, I know with the Johnston traffic study, it was Merle Hay, 86, of course, those were some hot spots. So I would completely imagine that this will find the same thing. And then it'll be interesting to see kind of how far that maybe goes down and to Des Moines and stuff like that. And that's really, back to kind of the intent of this program is looking at things regionally. And so that's like a good example of that could be a street where it crosses boundaries. So it's not just in one city, but now that becomes a powerful grant application, doing it together as a region or with a partner. I think, okay. And so I'll just pull up really quick. This is, again, it's in your packet too. This is just a 2-page handout that's got a lot of the same stuff that I just talked through. But the key here is that there is a QR code. I think it's listed out on here also. But there's a website. I'm sure it's on here. There it is, there at the bottom. So anyhow, that's a website that you can check out and kind of keep up to date on what's going on as far as what we're starting to find, and some of the reports and memos and things will be out there. But right now there's a map, kind of an interactive map. And so if you or anybody wants to go on there and log a comment or an observation, then you can just page into the intersection or the street that you want to. Just click on it and add your comment, and then it'll be part of the process. So that's really what I had to present. I would love to answer any questions though, if anybody has any questions as far as where we're at in this process right now.
Brian, in about the middle of your first presentation there, you have the 8 key items that are required,
Yes.
which look like, just different actions along along this process. Is there a timeline somewhere?
Well, like any good consultant team, I'm pretty sure we're behind on where we needed to be. But I know that, I believe the plan was to get through most of this this year. That way, you know, we know that there's at least going to be a couple of more years of this funding program out there. And so the idea is to get it wrapped up as quick as we can so that we can identify some of those projects, create some grant, and that's part of this too. I'm glad you brought that up. Once we go through and prioritize some of these projects, part of our job will be to take that information, create a grant application, and get it put in to hopefully get some implementation dollars too.
But you've been doing this, I mean, is it like a 12-month project? Is that?
Yeah, roughly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just have a question, and and it might be possible you wouldn't even have an opinion to give me, but are roundabouts better or worse for pedestrians in terms of safety?
I think that they're better, just because, you know, I hesitate because sometimes if there's, you know, the larger roundabouts, we do have to be careful about the crossings too, and really pay attention to maybe using like the rectangular rapid flash beacons or a hawk signal or something like that, if we need to. But in general, they're safer just because everybody's slowing down. There's more opportunity to look and see, and then just cross halfway, and then look the other way, and then, you know, wait for a gap. So in general, yeah, they've definitely proven to be safer for everybody using them.
Okay, thanks.
And you'll see too, that'll be one of the, part of this project will be coming up with proven safety countermeasures, we call them. So depending on what type of crashes and things are happening, and roundabouts are definitely one of those proven safety countermeasures too.
Brian, how much of the study takes into account kind of predictions of traffic density in certain areas and even extrapolating accident information moving forward? Obviously, there's areas around Johnston and in Johnston, the 141 corridor, for instance, that we anticipate continued growth. The density of 141 is already, you know, very strong. Will that play a role in any of your kind of research or your findings?
So the data is obviously historic. So a lot of the crash data that's out there and available is what's already happened. But another part of this process is to obviously take a look at that, you know, understand what's going on in the history, but also to try to look for risky locations. And so that's more like, okay, we know that the traffic hasn't necessarily, you know, built to the level that it's going to, but we also know that, you know, X type of intersection or X type of crosswalk is leading to issues based on what we know. So let's be more proactive about that and be thinking about that now. So the answer is yes and no.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Brian? Seeing none. Brian, thank you for being here this evening and going through this with us.
Okay,
Something
thank
to
you.
keep our eye on.
Yes, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
The next item on the agenda is to discuss Senate File 455 and the applicable text amendments to the Johnston Code of Ordinances, which originate from this legislation.
Good evening. To start off, we do have Josh DeBauer with Foth here with us this evening, so he can certainly help with a lot of the technical questions if they arise. But to give you a summary to start, this legislative session, the Iowa legislature approved Senate File 455. The governor has since signed that. It's slated to go into effect on July 1st. This is an act relating to the regulation of topsoil and stormwater at construction sites. And I did provide you a memo as well as a copy of the Senate file for, as part of your packet. I really broke the memo into two sections, one on topsoil and the second part on stormwater management. So I figure we can start with topsoil. It's probably the easier of the two topics here. We're largely complying with this legislation already with the manner in which we are regulating topsoil here in Johnston. We're not going to be allowed to regulate it any more restrictive than the state's DNR's general permit number 2. And so really the two areas that we need to work to clean up is there is some language in chapter 88 on our monitoring procedures that references a third party doing a review of construction sites. Well, that's not in the general permit number 2, but this legislation does explicitly state that a city can request the DNR to review the site. So just really swapping that language out to reflect that we can request the DNR to do a site inspection there. And then the second section is the placement of topsoil within public right-of-way. Presently, we refer to SUDAS, which requires 8 inches of topsoil to be placed in the public right-of-way. Since SUDAS is not a part of the general permit number 2, that will be non-enforceable, and we will not be able to regulate that. We could either just leave our standards the way they are and just not enforce it, or we could adopt a local amendment to explicitly state that it's not required. We certainly can still require it on any city-funded project. This would just apply to any private-funded project, so new development that the city is not leading. Either way, we're not going to be able to require it on those, but we do have 2 paths we could take there. So that's really topsoil. Is there any discussion items on that before we jump to stormwater management, which is a larger item?
I have a quick question. If we do rely on the DNR to do our inspections, will there be additional costs to the city to have them perform that operation? And I would be somewhat concerned if it would slow down a project if we had to stop and wait for the DNR to show up.
Yeah, the legislation doesn't address who would be responsible for paying. They did a financial, is it a financial note?
Fiscal note.
Fiscal note, and they did indicate that it would cost the state, they need to hire 8 new inspectors at a cost of, I think it was 1.7 million. That is not funded, so they are understaffed presently and will not be, they'll have a harder time following through on this. This is just a city may, it's not a city shall. I would anticipate this would be utilized in a scenario where we have reasonable belief that they're not complying with their general permit number 2, such as they're removing topsoil from the site and not preserving it on site. That would probably be a scenario in which we would request the DNR to inspect the site. But most sites, I would anticipate just managing as we presently are with the city overseeing compliance with the general permit number 2. That answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
Hearing nothing else on topsoil, stormwater management, this is going to be the area that likely impacts us much greater. Presently, we require stormwater to be managed such that a storm is, the release rate of a storm is a like-for-like storm. So a 5-year storm releases at a 5-year storm, 50-year storm at a 50-year storm rate. And we also require that the release rate utilize a pre-existing prairie meadow condition, which had a much lower runoff rate from surfaces. As adopted, will be restricted to, we can only require release rates to be according to the 5-year release rate of existing conditions. So a 50-year storm would now be released at a 5-year rate instead of a 50-year rate. If the site is presently a parking lot, it's no longer being released per meadow, it's being released per parking lot. So there is language that a city can have a more restrictive regulation, but it does impose costs upon the city. And I did provide the those bullet points here in the memo as well. And looking through the legislation, it is staff's intent that any forthcoming ordinance would include a water quality treatment requirement. Water quality treatment does not equal additional detention. There are multiple methods to treat stormwater. One such method could be having the stormwater go over an open grass swale instead of through a pipe, so that it has time for suspended solids to settle out. And certainly a developer could choose to do an extended detention and restrict their release rate, but that would not be mandated as anticipated by staff. And that's a real brief summary. I know it's a big topic, but I think I'd like to open it up for discussion at that point in questions.
I got to jump right back to topsoil. What does the DNR require, or what would be required of a developer if the parking area was, how deep would the topsoil be required to be put on? We're requiring 8 inches. What is the?
There is no depth requirement. You just have to preserve what is on the site presently. And preserve could mean I buried it 10, 20 feet underground. I did check with Christine, and she advised that regulating it and saying topsoil has to be on the surface is more restrictive than the general permit, since we're indicating a location, and the general permit number 2 does not. So if you have 1 inch of soil on the site now, you expect to have 1 inch of topsoil on the site post-construction.
Okay, thanks.
Clayton, did you talk to Christine about, even though we can't require certain things, if we could put into our ordinance, kind of urging them to follow best practices and kind of laying out what those are?
I did not address that with her, but I gotta imagine as long as it's not a mandated requirement and just a recommendation, that'd stand up, I gotta imagine.
At least we'd have something to point to when we're talking to developers and say, you know, this is really the most appropriate way to handle it.
We certainly could do that through a specific local amendment, perhaps, where, you know, it states, while not required, here's what we recommend. And then we can also be explicit and say, on any city-funded project, it is still expected.
Right, right. So we can show that we're imposing the mandates on us, and we're encouraging them to follow those best practices. Talk to her about it and see if that's something that we can do.
Yep, and that is a method that we're thinking of going with for the stormwater management as well. Still impose the more restrictive requirements on us as we presently have them, so that we're still maintaining those best management practices. And then on new development, private development, it would be recommended but not required. So we could certainly use that as a template.
Clayton, can you go a little bit more in depth to so this SF 455 restricts adoption or enforcement of an ordinance that regulates stormwater release more restrictive than what they've stated in here for the 5-year storm, but you implied that we still have the ability to regulate the quality of the stormwater infiltration or runoff, the water runoff, that's runoff, that we can hold on to it and let the solids filter out. Is that correct? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, that is staff's interpretation, the legal counsel's interpretation, because it's not mandating a release rate. You just have to treat the 1 1/4 inch rain event, and there are multiple methods that could be used to accomplish that, which do not necessarily require extended detention. Certainly give you more examples.
There's multiple ways to deal with that, but almost universally it's dealt with by infiltration, not some physical filter.
Wet ponds to allow it to settle out. You got the extended detention, which has your more restrictive release that detains it over the 48 hours. And then you also have mechanical separators, or like the situation with the city hall site, you have your underground detention, and then they do isolator rows with some fabric so that the silts get stuck in desired locations, so it's easier maintenance.
And all of those things pretty much slow down the release rate.
But
So there's kind of a,
But this is a huge gray area. I'm not gonna say there isn't a gray area with it, because there is rate control, and it can be interpreted by whatever side you're standing from as a rate control, but since we're not gonna require them to do the rate control option, you're, as part of the MS4 permit that you have to meet as a city, and the general 2 permit, the water quality is at 80% reduction of suspended solids. That is the requirement. They have to analyze to see that they're meeting your MS4 requirements. And all of the meetings before, they've been very open in stating that we're not going to get rid of that component. It's when we force the rate control, and there's other ways we could try without impacting the basin size, because that was always the argument at Capitol Hill. When you do additional rate controls, you have additional footprints, we're losing additional lots, then we have to spread our costs over the remaining lots, which is making unaffordable housing. By us allowing this as an option, you can still do some of this within the 5-year footprint, is how we're gonna try to argue this and structure the new code. We're still working through it, so it's gonna be a back and forth. All of it, I think, is gonna have to be run through Christine to make sure that we don't potentially overstep and add risk and additional cost on the city's behalf. That is unplanned, but it's kind of the best approach right now. And several other communities, I believe Clive is one that feels there is zero impact to water quality. Channel protection, that is a complete rate control, the 1-year rain event. I don't think we have an ability to require channel protection in any of this, but with the water quality being centered around that 80% reduction of suspended solids, I do believe the city's got grounds to hold that in the current code.
And what about for those, can we still also require water quality measures for larger rain events? Because it's a water quality regulation.
Those are gonna be this similar approach, even on the larger rains as your current code.
I'm sorry.
Even on your larger rains right now under current code, the water quality component is a smaller orifice, and anything over the 1.25 goes into that next release rate. So if I'm understanding your question on larger rain events, with the new code, it's a 50-year rain event. It's gonna go back to the 5-year existing as is condition. That's gonna release at the 5-year. You could have suspended solids that pass, but then once it gets down to a certain threshold, then it's gonna go back through the infiltration or whatever method they approve, we agree to.
So if you have a larger rain event, you could have some water quality measures sort of downstream from the detention that could help
It could help.
that could help to meet your water quality objectives.
Truly a holistic approach is gonna have to be going more regional, so that there's or we have, say, water hitting Beaver Creek, some kind of control in channels, but we don't formally know how that's gonna work out yet, rather than site by site.
And that's probably especially more likely to occur in those areas of Johnston that have not been developed, right? Obviously, if it's been developed, then you kind of you have what you
Kinda
have,
locked,
right?
yes.
This is for areas that we're talking about.
Northwest growth area
Right,
probably.
okay. So when you're talking about impacting Beaver Creek, you're talking about detention above Beaver Creek in that part of the community.
Answer.
yeah, I mean, there are other options for dealing with water quality and even rate. You know, I'd like to see more green roofs. I'd like to see more underground storage. But those, you know, there seems to be a huge reluctance to the vegetated roofs. And it's unfortunate because you know, in Europe, they seem to have figured out how to do it without being scared of it, or thinking it's too expensive. So, I
But
mean,
disagree with you.
I totally understand it comes down to square footage because we now have these bigger volumes of rain coming down, and that has changed the to deal with these huge volumes, these thunderstorms with the 9-inch rain, although you couldn't deal with the 9-inch rain. But if you get a really strong rain coming down, they're recommending bigger detention basins, which means you got less land for lots. That's where it comes down, right?
My personal standpoint, also professional, it's unfortunate that you're getting hit from both sides, the topsoil and the detention. Because we've always tried to argue, and even last year when we were successfully able to stop this from the first blush, if you would allow soil quality restorations, you would allow additional topsoil to be placed, you won't have as much runoff. Water will infiltrate. So rather than a 3-inch rain that falls off the sky, only an inch goes to the storm sewer. Rather than what we're gonna end up with now, where the 3-inch rain, 2.9 of it goes. So it's a paradigm shift that we were hoping would get some traction, that it has scared and it stopped. So it's unfortunate. But we're working through it. We're working on a draft that hopefully be shared near future. And yeah.
Josh, you mentioned the potential to kind of handle these regionally. And what I heard you say, though, is that even potentially kind of defining critical regions or targeted regions within our community. Can we do special assessments across a region as opposed to a specific site owner?
I think we would have issue there because one of the specific items in the legislation, a city shall not impose a special assessment or otherwise recover the costs from the property owner for the portions of the cost attributable to the city. So anything more restrictive, we cannot recapture is how I read that. We have not discussed, there could be some sort of district fee with Christine. We could certainly explore that.
Okay.
In reading this, I imagine it's going to be a tough one to get to.
Yeah, Iowa law allows today you to impose a fee across multiple property owners to help fund the cost of infrastructure related to regional intention. That's probably the route to do that because this legislation didn't change that.
That's okay.
That language is more in line, a development comes in, you want to impose all of your water quality channel protection, the multiple storms, you take an additional footprint, you can't take that additional cost and then allocate it back up to the benefited area. The question is if the city takes a proactive approach, does more of a regional study, creates the benefited area in advance of a development, can you create like a sewer connection fee district? That's the question, I guess, that needs to be vetted a little more thoroughly.
We could certainly work with Christine to explore that.
Can I ask one more question? When you talk about water quality from the standpoint, and this is just showing my naivete, I apologize, but when we talk about that we need to have 80% of particulate out of the water by the time when?
So it's just for the umbrella development, which is why there's areas, even if you do your best, there's areas that are going to be untreated and just bypass all of the systems. And that's why you see a lot of the silt fence until you get 80%, or is it 90? I'm fussy. It might be 90% coverage of the whole development before you remove it. Because the DNR feels that your wattles and your silt fence provide that 80% reduction if installed appropriately. But yeah, it's just for the developed area upstream of whatever control we put.
Is there any validation or verification of that? I mean, do cities spot check that 5 years after a development or 10 years? I mean, do I need to check my neighborhood or my yard?
I know some sampling has been done, specifically in the green metal flumes. Water with.
In the what
The
plumes?
soil testing?
No, it was actually rain events, and then they took samples of the effluent with the stormwater runoff, and you could see it with clarity in its settlement and everything that came out. But that was,
Green meadow flumes.
We
Oh,
do,
okay.
and we do have laboratory testing done by the Iowa Hygienic Lab. Is it annually? How many times?
Testing in about 10 sites, 3 times a year. That's not specific to testing whether a practice is working. It's really just kind of monitoring our overall health of our streams. As far as a practice on a particular site, we have a maintenance agreement in place. That's part of an easement that gets put in place that runs with the land, that they have to do certain maintenance and those kind of things. Kind of spells out what that maintenance is based on the type of practice. You know, that however is not something we generally follow up. We're not out doing inspections 5 years later unless there's an issue. If we get a notice of something, hey, we've got a problem going on, then we'll go out, pull up the maintenance agreement and work through that process. But
Thank you.
it's usually complaint driven, not, we're not just going out inspecting all of those.
All right.
I would note, though, we are required by our MS4 permit to do, excuse me, outfall inspections of our entire system. And so our Public Works Construction Inspector does those on a annual basis?
Yeah, we do 20%.
We do the whole system every 5 years out of our permit. And he's, obviously, if he's out there inspecting, he's looking at everything, not just where the water's coming out, so. We are getting eyes on stuff on a fairly routine basis.
And when you say where the water is coming out, give me an example of what that means.
It would be it'd be the outlet of whatever system. So I don't know how many sites we've got. We've got a lot, but they're all mapped, but
flared end section.
flared end section where
Okay.
it's draining into a creek or a drainage way.
Perfect. Thank you.
Pond.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep.
Other questions for Josh or Clayton?
I have a similar question to what
So you'll continue working on this and bring something back to us to consider?
Yep, so next steps on your consent agenda tonight is setting a public hearing for June 3rd for first consideration of an ordinance. So it is expected that you'll have that at your June 3rd meeting. Chapter 87 for the stormwater is required to be a public hearing because it's adopting a uniform code. And Chapter 88, the topsoil, we're not adopting any uniform code, so that would just be on your non-consent agenda since a public hearing is not required. But it's anticipated that both would be before you on June 3rd.
The expectation to have them adopted by July 1?
Ideally, we would, but a June 3rd start would push us to our first meeting in July.
Or you could waive the third reading. You could do the first, I mean, it's your you have options. It kind of depends on how the first 2 readings maybe go.
Certainly, changes and amendments could be made upon seeing the first reading.
Thank you.
The only thing I would kind of encourage is that, given that this is a pretty significant ordinance, that it might not be a bad idea to have an ad hoc group from the council and the mayor review it as part of that process. So I'd hate for us to kind of see that for the first time on the Friday before June 3rd without some opportunity to provide some input in that process. So just, that would be my suggestion.
Like to look at this?
I would like to be involved in that process if that's possible.
I'm a fan of clean water. I'd take part.
Isn't that our economic development?
Yes, the specific ad hoc, I mean, the only ad hoc committee we have between now and June 4th would be the quality of life.
Well, I guess I'm suggesting to have a meeting.
A special one.
A special meeting dedicated just to this issue.
So we do have 2 volunteers.
Because I'll step off if you'd like to
Need to
serve.
work with calendars,
What,
but
to be clear, what this ordinance is just taking what we have and reducing it to meet what the law is. It's, I don't know, I mean, that's what's gonna happen for June 3rd. Then going forward, there may be other ways that, I mean, what Clive is talking about doing, is that gonna be something they're gonna have all at once?
I haven't-
One, making their ordinance conform to the new law, two, trying to massage things so that we can still get the water quality where we want it to be?
I haven't seen their specifics for what they're trying. We're working with the Iowa Stormwater Education Program as well. The shared drive for examples of what other communities are doing. Everyone's kind of waiting for who's going to be first to upload.
I think it's vitally important that whatever ordinance we get adopted either at the second June meeting or the first July meeting have as robust of water quality regulation as possible. Because as soon as that becomes enforceable, a developer is going to come forward with a proposal. In fact, I believe we probably have one sitting waiting to work off of that. And if we do not have as robust a water quality regulation as possible, they will use that to their advantage. And I think that would really expose. So I think that's why it's so important for us. This may be as important of environmental regulation the city's going to consider, certainly in calendar year 2024. And from an ordinance standpoint. And so that's why I think it's important for us to really think through, because what we consider at the June 3rd meeting is going to start in place, really sort of set the direction for that.
But there's still an opportunity to make amendments to an ordinance later on. But what you're saying is they're actually a developer or developments that are just waiting for a time frame when this new law comes into effect, and then they can save some bucks.
If we do not have a robust regulation in place, somebody will try to take advantage of that. And that will be, and I don't think that anybody here at this table wants to see that happen.
I agree.
That does bring me to an aside that I would love to get all of your input on. On that topic, we do have a preliminary plat submitted for Greenwood Hills Plat 6. This would be kind of southwest of Jethro's on 86th Street, the treat area along the trail. And presently, they're looking to request a variation of our subdivision regulations to not address water quality or channel protection, believing that Senate File 455 restricts us from doing that. Legal counsel has advised us that because the application was submitted prior to July 1, we can impose our current regulations. They can always withdraw their application, resubmit post July 1 and receive those benefits, or submit an amendment to a preliminary plat post July 1. But at present, they are looking and requesting a variation, and they have requested, some preliminary feedback on if the council would be receptive to granting a variation. So I don't know if there's any guidance that you wish for me to take back to that developer.
No, Kelly, and we can only enforce the law that we have in place at the time. If they submit a plan, we enforce the law that we have. We don't know exactly what the amendments to our ordinance is going to be. So it's hard for us to speculate, let alone them to speculate on the requirements that might be. They can either submit their plan now and follow, the law that we have now, or they've already submitted. They can withdraw it and submit later. They have that as an option, but we can only enforce the law that we have in place today.
I can only speak for myself, but if they have submitted a plan prior to July 1, then they have to meet the requirement of the code as it is today. And I firmly believe that, and I would strongly oppose any change to that. Now, if they want to withdraw their application and wait until after July 1 or wait until this new regulation comes into effect, then that's up to them. And I thought we kind of clearly conveyed this, maybe it wasn't in a full actual council meeting, but I think the law is a law until July. Our resolutions or our ordinances are in effect until
until they're
June 30th,
changed.
Yeah.
And I did relay the message from the economic development. They was just hoping to get an opinion from others that were not present, because that was only 2 of the 5.
Do council members have other opinions?
No.
We'll relay the message that they should comply with regulations as presently adopted. Thank you.
We have 9 minutes left before the council meeting. Mike, is there anything we can cover?
Mayor and council, first, I just want to take a moment and thank Lieutenant Norrie's team. I know Chief McDaniel's not here, along with Janet Wilwarding for their work last week and a half with some of the events in the community. It just does, in moments like this, it does shine that we have a great team here, and I just really please relay to everyone for a job well done, so thank you. I'd like to turn it over to Matt, if he would, and give an update on 100th Street.
Good evening. Just wanted to give a quick update on our 100th Street project to the full council. We've worked 26 days. We've had about half as many rain days as we've had working days. So
Get a lot of work done today.
yeah, just in anticipation for the rain that's to come tonight and tomorrow. So we do have in phase 1, so that is between 62nd and just short of Windsor Parkway, we have 100% of the storm sewer pipe in. We've got the box culvert in underneath the low point of the street that comes out of Adam Ridge. We also have 50% of the water main completed. The contractor anticipates having the water main completed either later this week or early next week, weather permitting. And then they're looking at completing the grade work so that they can start paving by the end of next week, so by May 31st. We still have we're still on target to tear out the intersection at Windsor Parkway and 100th Street June 3rd after 9 a.m. So we'll let folks move through that intersection, and then we'll tear that intersection out. We've got a limited amount of time to get that intersection tore out. We do have some underground infrastructure to be relocated, and then to get that paving back in. If they're successful at that, we'll close down a little bit more of segment 2B, but they all understand that the focus is on the intersection, which is 2A. We'll continue to make progress on phase 1. We didn't hope to have that completed, but just weather hasn't cooperated to get that done. So we still do have ways out from the neighborhood, parallel on both the west and east side. They can either take 93rd to 54th, or 103rd now actually connects to the south, where the new medical plaza in Grimes is, back to 100th Street too. So we do have ways out of the neighborhood, but just wanted to give you a quick update on our project and where we're at with it.
Any questions for Matt?
I do have a question, but not about what he just presented.
Go ahead.
I'm trying to find it, and it seems to be lost, but did we not all get a letter from the president of the school board, Jennifer Chamberlain?
I got that.
It's about a street light or an intersection signal light at Summit. When I find it, I'll forward it to you all. Since you didn't get it,
I received it. It sounded like
Actually,
everybody
yeah, I
was
guess I
submit
did. I
public
haven't looked at
comment,
it yet.
but
I'm going to forward it on to you, and then I'd like to, if possible, get an update. And I guess it probably won't happen today, but when you can.
Sounds good. I'll take a look at it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean,
Anything else, Mike?
Nothing else.
We still have 5 minutes, so why don't we take council comments then? Councilman Evans.
I'd like to add on what Mike said about the police force and what they did in past week at least. Thank you for what you guys did. Appreciate what you guys, I live right across the street of that place. So I see that every day you come by and do your due diligence and work on that. Appreciate your patience coming by every time they call you and all the work you do up there. Thank you very much. And please pass on my message to all of your staff on this one. Thank you.
Councilman Coe,
I have nothing tonight.
Councilman Burkhart.
Just very briefly, the school year will, I think, come to an end. Be vigilant for all those kids that are going to be out and frolicking and playing. They already are there, especially as it gets later. So I'd ask everyone to watch them in that regard. My sincere congratulations to all the sports teams that not only qualified for state tournaments, but also did exceptionally well. Girls tennis finished third, girls track finished third, boys track finished 11th. We have a tennis player, I believe, a singles tennis player still playing. So I'm just thrilled with all the talent and ability that we have both on the sports venues, but certainly it's a major testament to have hundreds of graduates calling Johnston as they're graduating high school. And I'm so proud of all of them. And this is an exciting time of year, and I wish them all well.
Councilman Martin.
I hope everybody's zinnias are in the ground and growing, because it's a great time to have some seeds planted. That's all I got.
Mine are up. I'll just add my thanks to the police department and to our communications department for all of their good work over the last week as well. Unfortunately, the job is not done. We still have a lot of work to do, but we're confident that the entire team will be able to get through it and we'll make things better once this is all over with. So again, thank you very much. One event coming up that I would just bring to your attention, and that is JHS Decision Day, Johnston High School Seniors Decision Day. If you haven't gone to that, I would, and if you have some time on Thursday, I would encourage you to do that. It is such a cool event. What happens is all the seniors come out with these posters, these signs of what their plans are once they have graduated from high school, and they're there, you know, sharing with everybody in attendance, with each other, with parents, with teachers, and with members of the public. And it really is a really fun thing to see, but also to, you know, to engage with the kids and just, you know, talk to them about what their plans are for the future. So if you're available on Thursday from 9:15 to 9:45, it's in the cafeteria at the Johnston High School, and I would encourage you to check it out. The other thing that I'll just mention is that on that same day, the Iowa National Guard is having their command retreat, and what that is an opportunity for them to recognize either members within the Iowa National Guard or within the community for some things that you know are special. And this year we'll have representatives from the city of Johnston there because they want to recognize the city for their role in supporting Best Warriors competition that we just recently had here in our community. And so again, just you know, it's a special event, special recognition to the city, and I guess it's just, you know, one step closer to the national event that they're going to be having here in Johnston in 2 years. 2 years. So it truly was a privilege to host it this year, and it'll be even bigger and better in 2026. So anyway, just wanted to share that with all of you. Anything else before we adjourn the work session and go into the regular council meeting? If not, we will adjourn the work session.
That does not work for me any longer. So I'm
Neither
going to-
one of them?
No, it does not.
So